raised your hand. The briefing is broadcast via YouTube and Europe by satellite, and the footage can be used free of charge by all media. You will find the respective links in the invite you received. I'm now giving the floor to EMA's Head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy, Dr. Cavaleri. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'll start with the news from last week that our Human Medicine Committee, the CHMP, has concluded that a booster dose of the COVID-19 vaccine Spikevax from Moderna may be considered in people aged 18 years and above. This conclusion is based on data showing that a third dose of Spikevax given 6 to 8 months after the second dose leads to a rise in antibody levels in adults whose antibody levels were waning. The study did not reveal any safety issues, and the antibodies generated by the booster dose, which is half the dose of that used in the primary series, are showing an 18-fold increase in cross-neutralization against the Delta variant compared to pre-booster levels. This is reassuring in view of the continued spread of this variant around the continent. As a reminder, this opinion follows a similar recommendation from the CHMP earlier this month, concluding that a booster dose of Comirnaty, the Pfizer-BioNTech messenger RNA vaccine, may be considered at least 6 months after the second dose for people aged 18 years and above. These opinions pave the way for adults of all ages, including those at higher risk of COVID-19, to be considered for a booster. Data on effectiveness are continuously collected to inform on the best strategies to be adopted at national level, taking into account epidemiology and the detected waning of protection from infection and disease. Most member states, as you know, have started administering booster doses to vulnerable people or people more at risk of SARS-CoV-2 infection and transmission. Expansion of booster doses over time to a more general population could be foreseen as a likely next step, and the agency's recommendations are providing the flexibility that is required by national public health authorities to enable rapid decision-making at member state level to protect public health. There are at the moment no specific safety concerns over the use of booster doses behind what is already known from the administration of primary doses. Occurrence of myocarditis and pericarditis after booster doses with Spikevax and Comirnaty will be closely monitored. It is currently unknown, however, if these events will occur with a similar frequency after the booster doses, and at the moment no signals have emerged from the use of Comirnaty in Israel as a booster. As I mentioned in our last briefing, over the coming weeks, we also expect to receive data on the Janssen booster 6 months after the first dose. This will help us determine if the data will be sufficient to conclude on a recommendation for a booster dose. In parallel, we also consider data from a clinical trial that investigated whether an alternative schedule for primary vaccination composed of 2 doses administered with an interval of 2 months increases the initial immunity and protection compared to the currently approved single dose. At the same time, we will be actively looking at data using heterologous boosting across all vaccines. This appears to be an attractive strategy to efficiently boost immune responses after a single dose of the Janssen vaccine or 2 doses of the other approved vaccines. Another topic of interest is our ongoing evaluation of an application to extend the use of Comirnaty to children 5 to 11. Our current timeline for evaluation foresees a possible conclusion in December unless supplementary data or analysis is deemed needed. This is a shortened timetable compared to similar types of procedures and reviews outside of a pandemic. Further data have been collected and preliminarily submitted by Pfizer-BioNTech from the ongoing pediatric trial to expand the available safety database. The evaluation will consider this data as well, and a new formulation that will allow more flexible storage conditions is also under evaluation as part of this procedure. EMA is committed to doing everything it can to complete the evaluation as soon as possible, while ensuring a careful and robust evaluation of all the available efficacy and safety data in this very young age group. Among the 4 vaccines under rolling review, Novavax, which is a vaccine based on the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus with some other substances to boost the immune response, has submitted the data with respect to manufacturing, and this will allow us to progress in the review of this vaccine towards a possible approval in the coming weeks and months. EMA continues to be committed to evaluating additional vaccines that will expand not only the portfolio of options available for European citizens, but also importantly for citizens in other parts of the world living in countries that currently have limited access to COVID-19 vaccines. Vaccinating the world is crucial for exiting this pandemic. Moving to safety reviews, our safety committee, the PRAC, continues to scrutinize all emerging data on myocarditis and pericarditis, which, as you know, are inflammatory conditions of the heart that have been associated with the administration of messenger RNA vaccines. These are overall not serious, and most patients respond well to treatment and recover quickly. EMA will continue to monitor the vaccine safety and effectiveness and will communicate further when new information becomes available. We are also seeing that the epidemiological situation is becoming increasingly complicated in Europe, with numbers of COVID-19 infections on the rise again. We therefore reiterate our message on the importance of people getting vaccinated or completing their vaccination course as soon as possible. Regarding treatments, we have just communicated that the company Eli Lilly has withdrawn bamlanivimab and etesevimab from the marketing authorization application process, and the rolling review process, therefore, has been stopped. Questions were still open regarding some of the manufacturing aspects related to the final commercial product. However, there are no safety issues identified with the product, and the supply available for emergency use could still be used in accordance with national provisions and considering the variants that are in circulation. As a general principle, we continue to encourage developers to select and combine antiviral monoclonal antibodies that can retain activity against most of the emerging mutations of the virus. On a more positive note, we announced last week that EMA has started up a rolling review of the oral antiviral medicine molnupiravir for the treatment of COVID-19 in adults. As you know, the decision to start a rolling review was based on preliminary results from laboratory and clinical studies. And these studies suggest that the medicine may reduce the ability of the virus that causes COVID-19 to multiply in the body, thereby preventing hospitalization or death in patients with coronavirus disease. Although we cannot predict the overall timeline for the review, it should take less time than normal to evaluate an eventual application because of the work already done in the context of the rolling review. While the marketing authorization process is ongoing, we are also ready to give advice to member states so that they could make this new oral antiviral available for emergency use ahead of the authorization. The start of this procedure brings the total medicine under evaluation to 8, 3 are under rolling review, and 5 medicine for which a marketing authorization application has been already submitted. Through this work, we continue to support the EU COVID-19 therapeutic strategy and the European Commission objective to authorize new therapeutics before the end of this year. I will stop here and leave time as much as possible to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavaleri. We will now open up the floor for questions. So if you want to ask a question, please click on the respective icon at the bottom of the WebEx window to raise your hand. And when I give you the floor, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera. You can then ask your question. So the first question today comes from Maria Psara from Greek paper EFSIN. Maria, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for the floor and the briefing as well. 2 questions from my part. You mentioned the 4th wave. Are you concerned about this 4th wave that we see in different countries? Today, WHO said that the rhythm of the pandemic has increased and that Europe is again and the epicenter. Besides the vaccination, is there any other tool that you propose to fight the pandemic? And the second question, could you give us a timeline for the medical therapies? Do you expect that we will have medicines approved before the end of the year? If yes, how many? If not, when the first will be approved? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I give the first question to Dr. Sweeney and the second one to Dr. Cavaleri.
So, thank you. Yes, the epidemiological situation in Europe is very concerning now as we head into the winter with increases in infection rates, hospitalization, and we can also see the increase in fatalities. So this really emphasizes the point that Dr. Cavaleri has already made, that it's very important that everybody gets vaccinated or completes their dose of vaccination if they've already had a first dose but not a second dose. It's really important that we are all vaccinated, because we are not all protected until everyone is protected in that respect. You ask also about other measures. Clearly, national governments, we can see, are taking steps to introduce or reintroduce aspects of social distancing, face masks, but we need to follow all of these precautions very carefully, hand washing, so that we protect ourselves and protect others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavaleri now.
Yeah, so I said 8 medicines are under evaluation and 5 are in an advanced stage. And I would say that at least for 3 of them is highly likely that will be approved before the end of this year. Probably also a couple before the end of this month. Of course, there are still some aspects that needs to be clarified, but that is actually possible. Plus, there are other 2 medicines that could receive a positive opinion before the end of the year, but there are still some aspects that need to be sorted out before I can say that with certainty.
Thank you very much. We now have a question from Tara Tomovic from Euronews Serbia. Tara, please go ahead.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Greetings from Belgrade. Thank you for having me. I have 2 questions, actually. First one is about 4th dose. So because the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has updated its guidance on who can get a COVID-19 booster shot in USA. So now there are some people in the USA who are liable to receive a 4th dose of the COVID vaccine as soon as next year. Is it too soon to talk about that in Europe now or not? And my second question is about mix or match. So have you conducted any studies in which you have combined EMA vaccines with those that are not recognized by the EMA? For example, many people in Serbia received booster dose Pfizer-BioNTech after 2 doses of Sinopharm. So when it comes to mix or match, do you have any advice from us in non-EU countries where Sinopharm, Sinovac, and Sputnik V are widely in use? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tara. Dr. Cavaleri?
Yeah, so we will be following up on the matter of the 4th dose and to see for whom might be warranted. As you know, there are subjects that are immunocompromised that for whom we already recommended a 3rd dose as part of the primary series, and we cannot exclude that for some of them, indeed, a 4th dose might be needed or will be helpful. So clearly, we're looking forward collecting more data and understanding what these data are telling us in order to come up with any recommendation in this sense that could be helpful in understanding who are the patients or the people that might deserve to receive a 4th dose in the near future. With respect to the mix and match, as said, we do recognize that a number of studies have been already published that are showing that such an approach is give rise to a really good immune response, sometimes even better than when you go with an homologous approach. And therefore, this strategy is really an important strategy that member states are already taking into account, and other countries as well. And therefore, we would see really the value of going through this type of approach. Now, we have seen data, particularly with certain type of combinations, like the use of adenoviral vector and messenger RNA vaccines combined, but not so many data with respect to other type of platform technologies, such as inactivated whole virion vaccines as Sinovac or others. And we look forward collecting more evidence in this regard so that we could also come up with any recommendation with respect to the use of this type of vaccines as well.
Just a second, we need to check here a problem with the audio. Has that been corrected? Does Marco have to repeat his response, or was it understood by people? Okay, I think, Marco, you need to repeat. Thanks.
Okay, so for the fourth dose, I think we understand that there might be patients and subjects that are particularly vulnerable to this virus. And as you know, for the immunocompromised, we already recommended a third dose as part of the primary series. And it's not excluded that for this type of patient, they might not respond very well to vaccination, a fourth dose might be needed or considered already now. So we are looking forward to gather more evidence that could inform and make sure that we are in the position to make a recommendation with respect to the potential use of a fourth dose. To your question on mix and match, indeed, we see this as a really attractive strategy, and we've seen some data in which the heterologous boosting is giving rise to a higher level of immune response than what happens with homologous strategies in many cases. So therefore, we fully understand the interest of countries to use these strategies in their vaccination campaigns, not only from a flexibility perspective, but also to increase the protection for people that get vaccinated in this way. We will do a review, as stated, of the data that are currently available, acknowledging, however, that most of the data that have been generated are using a combination of adenoviral vector vaccines and messenger RNA vaccines, and we have less data with respect to other type of platform technologies, such as the whole virion inactivated vaccine that you mentioned. We look forward, anyway, looking at those data as well and try to understand to what extent we can recommend those strategies too.
Thank you very much, and apologies again for the audio problems. The next question comes from Helen Collis from Politico. Helen, please go ahead.
Hi there. More questions on boosters. Just to pick up on the last point on the mix and match study, when can we expect a recommendation from the EMA on mix and matching vaccines and boosters, firstly? And then secondly, the AstraZeneca vaccine, are there any talks there with the EMA to file a booster shot for the AstraZeneca vaccine? And one final question, please. I see that some countries are recommending that people who have had an adenovirus viral vector vaccine specifically should have a third dose 2 months after their course is completed with the adenoviral vector vaccines. Can you tell me if there's any data to support that? Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, so with respect to a potential recommendation from the EMA, as said, we are reviewing the data. We may expect that within a month from now, we will be in the position to issue any statement or a recommendation with regard to the mix and match. And we will also have to see, with respect to the product information, if any changes will be warranted at that point in time. But indeed, we are trying to gather all the evidence that is available from what are essentially academic studies in order to come up with a recommendation as soon as possible. With respect to AstraZeneca booster, we are in dialogue with the company, and the company are submitting to us some data that could support a potential extension to use a booster dose also with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And we will be discussing more with the company what could be the timetable for such a review and what could be the conclusion. With respect to the booster after 2 months, indeed, we have seen that many countries are recommending giving a booster quite early, which indeed would be quite unusual with respect to what we normally call a booster dose, which should occur at least after 4 to 6 months as a minimum. I guess this is stemming from the fact that they would like to achieve very good protection in all these subjects as soon as possible, and therefore they are trying to anticipate the use of the booster dose. There are some studies that have been conducted, and as an example, the NIH study gave the booster after 3 months from the primary series. So there are at least some data that could support that anyway, your immune response will go up even if the booster will be given pretty early, even if it's true that most of the evidence on the booster will come from administration after a longer period of time from the completion of the primary series.
Thank you very much. We now have a question from Victoria English from MedNu. Victoria, please.
Yes, I'd like to bring up, return to the question of the antiviral therapies that are in development and in review. Where do the antiviral therapies rank in the hierarchy of care? So let's say you had somebody who wasn't vaccinated and became ill. Would the antiviral therapies assist in the treatment of that person? Would the antiviral therapies be equally useful in treating people who have been vaccinated and show signs of illness, for example?
Thank you very much. Dr. Cavaleri, please.
This is, I think, it's an important question, and of course, as you know, particularly with the monoclonal antibodies, there were already a number of studies that have been showing that particularly patients that are not seroconverting yet, so in other words, have not mounted an immune response against the virus, are more at risk of progressing to severe disease and are the ones that are mostly benefiting from receiving such type of intervention. So it's important to look into subgroups and to understand what is the benefit of using certain type of antivirals in the different stages of the disease, considering whether the subject and the patient has been vaccinated or not, and also whether there is already the presence of an immune response to the virus because the subject has been exposed naturally to the virus. So these are all important questions that many of the trials that are undergoing and have been conducted will try to address, even if some of these studies have been conducted when vaccination campaigns were not really advanced, and therefore they are not covering the vaccinated people to a large extent or even not at all. So we will have to look into this aspect and try to see what could be the impact with the different populations.
The next question we take is from Ludwig Burger from Reuters. Ludwig, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on what you said about the potential booster dose application by AstraZeneca. It was not clear to me what the timing is. Has AstraZeneca already submitted data on it, or do you expect them to submit data soon? Thank you.
Dr. Cavaleri, can you please explain?
So yeah, AstraZeneca is submitting to us data, and actually today they submitted a new package of data that could support an extension to use the booster. Now we will be discussing with them whether this data could be sufficient for doing so or whether we need more evidence. So it's still early to say, but to reiterate that we are engaging actively with the company and we are looking forward, trying to find out whether we can conclude really in a fast pace with respect to the potential approval of a booster.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Maria Aron from Antenna Free TV from Greece. Maria, please. Can you hear us? Obviously, there's a problem with the audio.
Obviously.
Well, now we can hear you. Can you ask your question? Yes.
Hello, can you
Hi,
hear me
yes,
now?
we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Well, my name is Maria Aroni. I work for Athens News Agency and Open TV. I have a question on children vaccination. You said that you will soon have a conclusion on your assessment, maybe in December. First of all, I would like to ask if it is the same vaccine as the adult one. I don't remember if for the kids from 12 to 18 it is the same vaccine as the adult one as well. Could you please clarify this? And my question is, if children are less likely to get seriously ill from COVID, why would should we vaccinate them? Thank you very much.
Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, so with respect to your first question, the formulation is the same formulation that has been recently approved for use in adults, which has an improved stability period, so is easier to handle. And with respect to the dose, however, there is a difference because the dose in children below 12 years of age will be 1/3 of the one that is approved for adults. So will be 10 microgram of messenger RNA compared to 30 microgram of messenger RNA, which is the dose for adults. So that is the key difference. With respect to the benefit risk in this age group, this will be an important aspect that will be tackled by the CHMP and discussed in the emergency task force. And we are collecting data right now with respect to the burden of disease in children below 12 years of age, also in the European Union. We have seen quite a substantial amount of data that have been brought forward by the US CDC with respect to the burden of disease in children in the United States, which really shows that even if severe disease occurs much less in children than in adults, still it occurs. Still, there are children that go to the hospital, go to the intensive care. There are also children that could die because of COVID. And there are children that are affected by this multi-inflammatory syndrome that is really typical for the pediatric population, and it carries a considerable burden of disease. So overall, we will have to look into all these aspects in making clear what will be the benefit of vaccinating children of this age.
Thank you very much. We now have a question from Italy, Claudia Di Pasquale from Italian TV Rai 3. Claudia, please. Claudia, we cannot hear you.
Ah, okay.
But now, yes. Now we just heard you. Please go ahead. Again, we can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead. There still seems to be a problem. We don't hear you.
So, yes, sorry.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear?
Now we can hear you. Yeah, please ask your question.
Okay, this is Claudia Di Pasquale from Report Rai 3. We produced a segment on bacteria vaccine, and
the connection is broken, Claudia. Perhaps you need to switch off your camera. We cannot really hear you. Switch off your camera and try again.
Years and older. EMA has always said that, okay. Try again. EMA authorized AstraZeneca vaccine for using people.
Sorry, this doesn't work. Perhaps you need to put your question in, Claudia. This doesn't work. This doesn't work because we can't really hear you. Please put your question in the chat and I can read it then, but we can't really hear you and don't really understand the question. So I'm going now, please put it in the chat and then I'm going to read it out and we can respond. I'm now going to take a question of Rosen Le Saint from Mediapart. Rosen.
The chat.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I have 3 questions. The first one is about the BMG investigation. Do these irregularities raised by the British Medical Journal compromise the Pfizer's marketing authorizations granted by the EMA for Pfizer's COVID-19 booster dose, and the one EMA is working on it for children and young adults? The second one is about the molnupiravir. What were precisely the additional data required by the EMA, which decided the laboratory to withdraw its demand? And the third one is again about the molnupiravir. The EMA has communicated saying that certain questions concerning the quality of the drugs remained to be dealt with in a satisfactory manner. So why the EMA does not modify its previous opinion issued in March encouraging the national authorities to use the monoclonal antibodies produced by Lilly before the end of the examination from the EMA, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there was a little bit of confusion. The first one was on the BMJ article, and I will ask Dr. Sweeney to respond to that. The second one, I think you said molnupiravir, but you meant the Eli Lilly antibody cocktails. And the third one was on the molnupiravir, and the two last questions are going to be responded to by Dr. Cavaleri. But first, let's go to Dr. Sweeney on the BMJ article. Fergus, please.
Thank you. Regarding the BMJ article, which contains allegations about the conduct of the vaccine study for Pfizer in one of the sites in the US, that we take very seriously. We're in close contact with the Food and Drug Administration of the US to understand their investigations, and once we have further information in that respect, we will be pursuing that, but there's no reason to suspect at this stage that that would undermine the quality, safety, or efficacy of the product or the CHMP opinion on the product. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for the two last questions, Dr. Cavaleri.
Yeah, and our understanding is that indeed you are referring to bamlanivimab and etesivimab, so the two monoclonal antibodies from Eli Lilly that have been withdrawn from the marketing authorization process. Indeed, as said before, we stated that the process was not yet completed and there were some aspects to be resolved with respect to the manufacturing of the final commercial batches. So not the batches that have been deployed so far in the context of the emergency use, but in the context of the manufacturing of the batches that were supposed to be deployed in a larger amount, possibly in the context of commercial products. So that's why there is a difference there. This is essentially was the part that was still missing. We were pretty content with respect to the safety and efficacy data that were submitted, and therefore we still consider that if there are still supply of these monoclonal antibodies available at national level, and if member states would like to use them, they can do so. It's their decision. Of course, taking also into account what are the variants that are circulating, as we know that this cocktail can be vulnerable against certain variants, but not the Delta specifically.
Thank you very much. We now take a question from Olivier Monod from French newspaper Libération. Olivier. Olivier, we can't hear you. I think now you're online. Can you ask your question, Olivier? We don't hear you. Sorry, Olivier. Okay, while we're trying to sort out those problems, I'll take a question from Irene Zakadoula from Greece. Irene?
Hello, I hope you hear me.
Yes, we hear you, all fine.
Clearly. So I'd like to ask on the pregnant women, what would you suggest for the vaccination of pregnant women? And I'm coming back again to this question because there have been some reports where doctors disencouraged women that are pregnant to get vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Dr. Cavaleri?
Yeah, so it's pretty clear that unfortunately pregnant women are at risk of severe COVID, so it's one of those populations that really deserve to consider vaccination in order to protect themselves. We have now seen a number of studies that have been reported in the scientific literature that are showing that the vaccines, particularly the messenger RNA vaccine that were studied in pregnant women, are safe, and also they're able to mount a robust immune response that will be protective, particularly when vaccination is occurring during the second and fourth trimester. So therefore, it's pretty clear that vaccinating pregnant women is important, and we fully support and understand decision by member states authorities to recommend vaccination of pregnant women.
Thank you very much. We now have the question from Claudia Di Pasquale. It's a little bit difficult to read for me, but I try. So, EMA authorized AstraZeneca vaccine for use in people aged 18 years and older. EMA has always said that the overall benefits of Vaxzevria outweigh risks from adverse events, including thrombosis with thrombocytopenia. You wrote that the benefits of vaccination increase with increasing age and increasing infection rates. It means that the benefits decrease with decreasing age and decreasing infection rates. And according to the graphs you published on 23rd April in collaboration with the Winston Center, the benefit, as always using the overall benefits, I lost it. The benefit-risk balance is not so clear for young people. The EU member states ended up taking different decisions from one another, from stopping the rollout completely to change age restrictions from under 60 to under 40 to 18 years old and older. The EU member states ended up with several unused Vaxzevria doses as well because of people losing their trust in this vaccine. And it happened because there was no common line. Would a strong and common EMA line have avoided confusion? I'm going to give this question to Georgi Genov. Dr. Genov, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a complex and important question. I think the fact that we were able to very early in the vaccination campaign detect the important risk of TTS, thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, shows the well-functioning pharmacovigilance system and the action taken by all stakeholders to identify the risk, to inform all relevant concerned parties, healthcare professionals and people to be vaccinated on this risk has been, I think, instrumental in and implemented in a very prompt manner. We have seen since the identification and communications on this risk, a reduction of, unfortunately, in some cases, fatal outcome of these events. Now, in terms of the actions taken by the agency of what's in our remit to identify, fully characterize, and do everything possible to communicate and prevent this risk, I think we have done a really good job. And then on the actions taken by member states where there might have been different recommendation or age restrictions, I think it's that's in the remit to base those decisions based on information we have provided on the risk and the local epidemiological situation along with other consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Genov. So now Olivier Monod typed in his question. So he has two questions. One is about molnupiravir. UK have authorized molnupiravir. Are you considering to issue an emergency authorization for the use of molnupiravir? And the second question is, the Together trial have published results about the use of fluvoxamine. Are you reviewing those results, and what do you think of the use of fluvoxamine against COVID? Both questions are for Dr. Cavaleri, please.
Yeah, as said, with molnupiravir, we started the rolling review, and now we will try to speed up our assessment in order to reach an authorization as soon as possible. But as said, in the meanwhile, because we are entering and we are already into the fourth wave of this pandemic, we will be considering whether a scientific opinion from the EMA could support emergency use authorization at the level of each member state. As you know, we don't have an emergency use authorization framework at the central level at the EMA. But as we've done similarly with the other monoclonal antibodies with antiviral activity, we are considering whether this approach could be done here as well in order to provide promptly a position from the EMA that could help member states in using this product as well. With respect to fluvoxamine, mentioned, we were in touch with the investigator of this trial since a while, and now the next step will be to review the data from the study and then take it from there to see whether this evidence could be sufficient for any recommendation or whether we need more clinical data.
Thank you very much. We are now taking a last question from Ian Schofield from Scrip. If you still have a question. I just saw your hand going down. Ian, do you still have a question?
No, that was answered.
Okay, thank you very much.
My question was on molnupiravir, so that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for participating in today's press briefing. I also particularly thank the participants here with me today, and I wish you all a very nice rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Fotografias novas no coração. Todavia tudo tem um fim. Hoje cheio de cores e amanhã já podre. Sempre novos dias, novas noites, novos contos, nova saudade, fotografias novas no coração. Todavia tudo tem um fim, hoje cheio de cores e amanhã já podre.
Es gibt viele Möglichkeiten, Radio Suisse Jazz zu Hause oder unterwegs zu empfangen. Erkundigen Sie sich